early part of the Atlantean period. Then we came down later. It's not true that we evolved from them. Is there anything I've left out? Wow, I think I could actually be sort of done. Okay, any questions? Okay, all right.
Thank you, James. I think you did a wonderful job in giving a very complicated subject and formulation scheme a very good shot at a description. Our programs here at the Theosophical Society are without charge, but we would like to give you an opportunity to make a free will donation to help us with the maintenance of the lives of the facilities. In the beginning, as James pointed out, there were evolutions in our consciousness taking place. And next week's program on October the 3rd will be a program by our national president, John Algeo, on Sinzar and other mystery languages. All over the world and at all times, people have used sacred mystery languages to communicate that which is almost inexplicable, which convey inner symbolic meanings under their outer forms. Hebrew, Sanskrit, hieroglyphics, and runes are a few of these. The archetypal mystery language is HPV's Sinzar, the primal language of all humanity. And our national president of the Theosophical Society will be our speaker next week. Membership in the Theosophical Society is open to anyone in sympathy with its objects, which are to form a nucleus of the universal brotherhood of humanity without distinction of race, creed, sex, caste, or color. And secondly, to encourage the study of comparative religious philosophy and science. And thirdly, to investigate unexplained laws of nature and the powerless and latent in man, one of which is clairvoyance, as James indicated. As he pointed out in his presentation, the spirit that is us and that is in essence in us and in everything was attracted, accreted into manifest existence, into matter by a type of desire, and it has positive and negative implications in our everyday life. And James also pointed out the relationship of the physical embodiment to the atmic aspect, the highest aspect of our physicalized nature, and the fact that our bodies are governed by inner laws. The Manvantara period of manifestation is said in the Theosophical literature to be 311 trillion, 40 billion years. And that's a period of manifestation, and then there's a palaya, or a period of rest after that of equal length. In the planetary palaya, or rest period, there is no disintegration of the planets, but in the major palaya, the planets disintegrate, but not the archetypal images in divine mind. The races and characteristics that James mentioned have, in essence, theosophically come back to haunt us because they've been attached to race as a negative word and a negative aspect in our human manifest existence. But they're actually archetypal influences or characteristics on us as humans in the form of a life wave passing through the planetary spheres that James alluded to, influencing the corresponding aspects of our human nature. It is said in our literature, man is a microcosm of the macrocosm. I was also struck by the BlackBerry example that James used in his description. It is reflected in the evolution of the zygote. The human body passes through all of the previous stages of our evolutionary development until man is born as a child. The subject is as abstruse as I mentioned in my introduction, and I thought James did a wonderful job of giving an overview. Maybe from his perspective, the terms were crude, but it's almost impossible. He gave us information today that should have been presented in a 5 or 6 hour seminar, and even then, it would not have been given justice. So I commend him, and I think that the education that he had subjected himself to in his early training was one of the aspects of his personal nature that even enabled him to make such a presentation. I have tried during a members program to trace the life wave influence down through the unmanifest planet, through the more manifest planets, and down into manifest planets. And staying on the topic, doing it extemporaneously was extremely difficult, but in any event, it can be done. I have studied this particular subject for 30 years and am still struggling in the dark to grasp the overall rationale. I'd like to give James an opportunity to respond to your questions because I'm sure you formulated some, and then I'd like for you to join us for refreshments. James.
Do what I can. I need to refer to these. Any questions? Yes?
I'd like to ask, in view of all these millennia and what has happened to us in the past, I wonder what Kabbalists foresee as for the coming millennia, and in lieu of that, and with that as a background. Can we look forward?
I forgot to talk about the apocalypse. Okay. We do have a document, symbolic document, which, if properly understood, can give us some keys to that. Okay. Let's talk about, here we are, the red dot. The war of all against all is not coming that soon. Some bad stuff is coming, chapter 13 in particular, but the war of all against all, Armageddon, proper, will occur here just before 8000 AD. High-grade clairvoyance, jumping back to that, has observed that what it was described in chapter, I think it's 12, as the war between Michael and the dragon occurred over a period of 40 years in the latter part of the 1800s. So we can expect chapter 14 to unfold in the not-too-distant future. The window of opportunity actually given is about 270 years, starting from about now. Within that window of opportunity, the Ahrimanic being, supposedly referred to as Satan, will incarnate in America. And he will be working for the sun demon Sorat, whose name in Hebrew reduces to the three numbers 666. And this is a reflection in time about the occurrence of about the incarnation of Christ, of the occurrence 2,000 years BC of the incarnation of Lucifer in China. He was one of the first warlords. And so, symmetrically in time, we will have an incarnation in the West, not the East, but in the West now, of the complementary laggard type being, Ahriman. And so we can expect to see some bad stuff happen within the next 300 years vis-a-vis that, but it's not Armageddon yet. Now,
Anything good?
yeah. If you just think good thoughts and do good deeds, and keep doing that from incarnation to incarnation. By the way, the incarnation started with the fall, and that's referred to as pain during childbirth of Eve. Those will stop up in here as the earth becomes etherized. Now, actually in the, I get this right, I believe it's in the 6th age, as the earth starts to become, there will actually be a separation between the crude material, which will start to fall away as slag in the cosmos, and the kingdoms. The moon will rejoin the earth. Just as it was pulled out in the Lemurian time, it will rejoin because the conditions will allow it. Now, as matter is disappearing this way and things are rejoining, we can expect physical cataclysms, and those are described in the apocalypse. That's what that's about. So environmentalists, it's hopeless. What God is going to do to our earth is a lot worse than anything we can do. Now, in the seventh period, the sun will be so far etherealized that the sun will rejoin the earth. Before that happens, there will be two races that separate. There will be a progressive race and a race of evil beings who just cannot keep up. In other words, our laggard spirits. That separation will occur in the sixth
round.
Yeah.
Or the sixth round.
Yeah, in the sixth round. That will be the period that is referred to as the unsealing of the seals. We will be unsealed. Before that, just before the sixth round, I believe that the progressive humans will start to, as they are redeemed, the ones that are, their physical bodies will take up a manifestation in form on the etheric plane. And so at first there will be two physical races, but they will separate, and the lower race will no longer be able to see the progressive race because it will be physically visible. And after that, in the sixth round, the seals, you see, refer to, this is picture symbolism. They refer to the astral world. So the our experience in seven periods will unfold at an astral level, and that's this unsealing. In the seventh period, our consciousness will rise even above the astral into the devachanic plane. Devachan is characterized by the harmony of the spheres. That's where you have tones. You have images at the astral level. And so the appropriate symbolism for devachanic activity is the sounding of the trumpets. That's what the sounding of the trumpets refer to, is an entry into devachanic consciousness. So you have to be careful of the apocalypse. It's got a number of time scales overlapping at once, all at once. So you've got shorter and larger time scales. Depending on the particular symbolism you're looking at, we'll overlay it all at once. So you've got to unravel it, you've got to dissect it out to be able to see what time scale you're looking at. So these things I'm telling you, they are also repeated in the same way that I talked about earlier with the cyclical paradigms. They're repeated on larger and larger time scales out into the future rounds. So you have to very carefully interpret the symbolism to see what you're looking at in a given time period. So there will be cataclysms. There will be a revolution of the elements just before we enter the sixth period during the War of All Against All. Okay, maybe I should ask for another question. Does that do it for you?
That's all right. Yeah.
Oh, okay. Yes. Somebody should ask me about the time scales.
Would you differentiate briefly between the outer and inner rounds?
Oh, you mean the five outer and the, well, they're not visible, so we can only get secondhand information from the beings who can.
Well, what they refer to as well.
Well, I believe that they're occurring in the Buddhic and Nirvanic planes, and of course they're an assimilation of the experience that has occurred in the Manvantaras, and a planning of what to do next. So it's when things get, it's the key to the metamorphoses that occur. That's all I can think of to say right now. Anything else?
What, the time thing you mentioned?
Oh yeah, the time. I have looked at some of the Eastern yugas and timescales, and I see a lot of disagreement depending on the sources. You see another several zeros depending on who you're reading. So, you know, this is the time scale with these ages, the precession, that I'm concerned about. Now, of course, before the moon left the Earth, I don't think we could talk about the precession of the vernal equinox. So you're dealing there with a gauging of time having to do with the cherubim. It had to somehow be measured differently. And as you rise up from the etheric into the astral levels, on both ends of the globe, what do you mean by time? Time, as we know it, only exists in the etheric world. Once you get into the astral world, it's a whole different ballgame. So you cannot just directly extrapolate back and add up multiples of 2160 years to see how long since the old Saturn began. It just doesn't work that way. It's apples and oranges. Now, when I talked about dinosaurs, I was wondering if anyone was going to attack me because they're supposed to have existed millions of years ago. And I've gone around about this with some people. As a chemist, I understand how carbon-14 dating works, and there are some assumptions there which I don't think are valid. First of all, if matter is metamorphosing from the beginning of the globe to the end of the globe, then you can't extrapolate atomic behavior now back into those distant ages. Isotopes probably are not going to behave the same. And the way carbon-14 dating works is it assumes that the distribution of isotopes now in the atmosphere that's created steadily is a steady creation and destruction. It was the same way back when the plants and the animals took in the plants taking carbon dioxide, and then the animals eat the plants. And it's assumed that when they did that, the same distribution of carbon-14 existed. Carbon-14 gets created in our atmosphere by bombardment with neutrons. They get created as fragments from gamma ray bombardment of other molecules. And from nitrogen, you get a carbon-14 and a tritium atom. The carbon-14 reacts with the oxygen to give CO2. Now, in the Atlantean period, in the Lemurian period, we had these gases way out in the atmosphere, and the chemical ether was also greatly expanded. So atomic structure, for one, couldn't be expected to be the same. And I would suggest that the gases and fumes would interfere with the creation of isotopes. So there would be a lot less carbon-14 around. So what would happen is that the fossils we're looking at, what would happen is that they would appear to be a lot older than they are because they've got so little carbon-14 in them, because there was so little around to begin with. So we jump to the conclusion that it's been decaying longer. Carbon-14 has a half-life of, I think, 5,730 years. And so we just extrapolate back with that, and we've made a mistake if there wasn't the same distribution then as now. So I would suggest that dinosaurs, their fossils are not as old as science thinks they are, but I'm flexible with the problems of what time is. You have to be flexible about this. And also there are other ways of measuring time. There are tree rings, things like that, and I would suggest that things grew at a different rate in a more ethereal time. And, you know, so there are a whole lot of issues that have to get unraveled here. Ultimately, this kind of question has to be settled with the Akashic records. You have to have an occult scientist who can go and read the records and line everything up and come up with a correction to whatever dating techniques we have. Of course, if you can read the records, who needs that? But that's how it has to be settled. Speculation is provisional. So that's how I feel about the dating techniques and the time. Yes, you can.
How you know all these things to be true?
I don't.
It's
They're
just
a
assumptions
working
that you-
hypothesis.
Yeah.
I looked around, I have a wall of occult literature, floor to ceiling. I read everything I could get my hands on that looked good, threw some of it away, and by process of elimination, I've come up with the best working hypothesis that is better than anything I've ever seen in explaining what I see. So that's my current going working hypothesis. I don't know them to be true. I believe the nature of proof to be individual. I'm taking the testimony of clairvoyance, and I'm developing myself as they instruct so that I can observe myself and have proof. When I am able to observe myself, then I will have proof. Until then, I can't have proof. It's just a working hypothesis. Yeah.
growing out of that, what are the two best articulations that you found of this particular perception? Text.
Oh, I knew that question was coming.
What was the question? I didn't-
What were the two best articulations of this? And already, when you say two, you
Yeah.
didn't say one.
Right.
You're molding the answer. And I was prepared to say just that. I would have to say, I have to phrase this diplomatically, okay, Blavatsky and Rudolf Steiner. I believe, from my own intellectual efforts and gatherings, that Rudolf Steiner is the most reliable of the readers of the Akashic Records. But I give full respect and credit to the contributions of H.P. Blavatsky. I don't believe that she was as far developed as Steiner. I believe she was only capable of reading the first level of the Akasha. And she was also heavily under the influence early on of Egyptian initiates and later of Hindu initiates. And they were not without political agendas. So there's actually a lot of really interesting, unnerving stuff in the history of the past 100 years. I don't want to go into that now, but I believe that if you take 4 books, if you take Theosophy, an outline of occult science, written by Steiner, and you take Isis Unveiled and the Secret Doctrine by Blavatsky, and you study all 4 of those, you'll have the basis of what's around of this stuff. And I would just, I have the caveat that I think it's generally agreed that Blavatsky had problems presenting things in a coherent, systematic way. I think you might do better to start off with Steiner and then dive into Blavatsky and try to keep your bearings. So I would further say that I don't trust as much the seership of Ledbetter, Besant, Alice Bailey, and the Roricks. They of course have contributions to make, but we have to remember how vulnerable the initial stages of clairvoyance are to deception. This is something you have to really be careful of. The best advice is to believe nothing you see when you start having visions. It takes a long time to get objective. Okay.
Wow.
Thank you, Jane.